I'm glad to be here today. Thank you to my colleagues, Alexis, Mary Christine, Carla, and the rest of you for taking the time of, talk about these events today. I'm going to share a presentation with you. I hope that you can see it. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yes? Cool. So what I want to share with you today are some of my last reflections about a Chilean counter-monument wave, a phenomenon that has raised powerful questions for Chilean political community and has revealed the strong conflicts of collective memory that we are facing today. So somehow this project is not strictly connected to what is being commemorated today in Chile, but I see the result as something that can help us to explain and to understand why we have arrived to this event, right, to this commemoration in such a controversial and difficult way. So just a bit of a context, I think I believe this is not really important here, but you never know. Chile faced the dictatorship, and we have more than 3,000 people that disappear and more than 40,000 people that were tortured, according to official reports. But Pinochet's dictatorship also transformed the economic system, turning Chile into one of the most neoliberal societies in the world. But also, as Alexis was explaining right now, Chilean the dictatorship also imposed a constitution that Chileans are trying now to change in a difficult and paradoxical way. But we, as a society, right, have been trying to face these events in many ways, but the trauma has become the dominant frame to deal with this event, to understand and to process the difficult heritage that we have. So after difficult and violent political periods, societies face a process of coming to terms with their past, a social process that, especially after the Second World War and in the aftermath of the Holocaust, many authors have paralleled to the physical or psychological healing process after traumatic situations. This idea has become a transnational discourse, and the idea of trauma, the importance of dealing with that, has permeated social discourse and become a cultural category. I will say in the region, right, in Latin America, but especially in Chile. So we have this frame that helps us as a society to understand what's going on with our difficult past. But a few years ago, we faced this social uprising, right, in 2019, marking the beginning of the largest wave of mobilizations in Chile since the end of the dictatorship. So we have, during this period, 31 people that were killed in different situations, some of them by the police, and more than 300 people that suffer eye injuries, and also 3,000 victims of police abuse in only 5 months of protest. This has been registered and reported by different international organizations such as Amnesty and Human Rights Watch. But during this very convulsive month, people from different generations, classes, and territories went to the street, right, to clamor for an array of many different demands and for socio-political and economic transformations. Most of these demands were linked to policies that we inherit from the dictatorship, but also to other historical silence forms of oppression. So the protest gave rise to what I've been trying to understand as a mnemonic movement, right? So there's a mobilization of Chilean meanings and representations of the past, not only of the dictatorship, but especially, and I would say that was very central in this during this time. These mobilizations activated a very complex constituent moment in Chile that has opened the space and time to think about how Chileans see themselves and what type of rules, codes, and emblems they want to follow. The process has had many chapters, as Alexis was also explaining. It's very difficult, I think, to follow the line of these events. It's really chaotic, and it's very unbelievable where we are. And we can talk about later. But which is clear is that the process that can be read as a refundational moment, at least at the beginning, is still open. And Chileans are right now in the aftermath of the uprising. This process and his particular temporality have a parallel side, which have been called the Chilean counter-monument wave. So the social uprising released the questioning, intervention, creation, and in some cases the destruction of Chile's public memory and monuments. Since October 2019, more than 400 public monuments through the entire country suffer alteration. That means more than 64% of these monuments. These were affected by different types of alterations, from the destruction and removal of the monument to the dismemberment, the burning, to the sticking of stickers or graffitis on the monuments. These are monuments built in different historical periods with the purpose of preserving the hegemonic memory of the nation state. They represent colonial and national heroes, men of the elite, of the military, which is very important for the event that we are celebrating today, of the politics, and some of them of the cultural world. This social phenomenon, although it's not new in Chile or the world, has been expressed in this country in a magnitude and extension never seen before for Chilean society, which unveil a demand for the construction of a counter-hegemonic memory. The reflections that I'm sharing with you today are inspired by debates of cultural and political sociology, and also from memory studies. I draw on works that highlights the conflicting dimension of memory, a dimension that is intensified and accelerated in times of social change and mobilization. And in this line, I'm in conversation with the expanding field of memory and activism. Second, this work is inspired by literature that emphasizes the role of space as a material anchor of this social phenomenon and of the identities that memory makes possible. Then I understand monuments and their surrounding space as center of meaning and conflict. And finally, these reflections are inspired by debates on the fields of sociology of time that argue that time can be understood not only in linear terms, but most importantly in terms of how we experience time. I am in conversation with recent works on temporal structures and mnemonic regimes as necessary forms to understand the effects of modernity. Here, I stress the relevance of understanding forms of challenging those temporal structures or temporal regimes. And in that sense, the aftermath, which is the period like after the events of mobilization, is, I think, a way to challenge these temporal structures, a temporality that is left outside social movement periodization and of the fruitful link between memory and activism. So as you know, these reflections are the results of this 3-year qualitative research project that's still ongoing, in the last year. So it has interviews with demonstrators and with experts in issues of heritage, architecture, and memory, and also archival work, including official documents and press reports. And I've been looking at 3 main cases, the cities of Valparaiso, Temuco, and Punta Arenas, but also here in Santiago. So this wave of counter monuments came to challenge Chilean mnemonic regime about the nation, and also about how we face our difficult past through an entangle of different temporalities. So during those months, and I will say until today, the dictatorial past came to the streets especially the crimes perpetrated by the dictatorship, but also the resistance to that violence. In that sense, the Unidad Popular came also to the streets. It was very impressive to see figures of Allende, like transiting like the demonstrations in different cities of Chile, and also in the walls of many parts of the city. But also the patriarchal past came to the streets, meaning recent and long-standing violence against women and the struggles of feminist movements, as Marie-Christine was also explaining. The national past came also to the streets, meaning national land occupation and violence against indigenous people, but also the military culture that allowed this process and the ideals of progress and industrialization in Chile. And finally, and not for that less important, the colonial past came also to the streets, meaning the Spanish colonial occupation of lands and violence against indigenous peoples, and also their indigenous struggles now and then. So drawing from these debates that assume the crucial place of time when we think about memory and activism, the analysis of my data suggests that the wave of counter-monuments in Chile needs to be analyzed not only considering the critical junctures, meaning the moment in which thousands of people were mobilized, but also the aftermath, literally the moment that came after the intervention of monuments, in which we still are, a time that tend to receive less attention, as is less eventful, but when the rhythms of protest still resonate, or in the words of Donatella de la Porta, when they still vibrate. The analysis reveals two main cultural processes of the aftermath. On one hand, an aesthetic process, and on the other one, a moral one. And here you can see, as a part of this aftermath time, the vandalization of the statue of Salvador Allende that came in 2001, and then again in 2022. This is in the La Comuna, in this district of San Miguel in Santiago, the capital. So first, the aesthetic process contrasts the heroic, masculine, and homogeneous aesthetic versus uncertain aesthetics and the empty space as the center of the dispute. It is triggered by the material ruptures of the protest that provide in the aftermath a concrete canvas for political and social imagination. The aesthetic process is connected to the negotiation of cultural categories to deal with the remains and sediments of protest, where people elaborate what has changed in the public space, if the place is dirty, if what remains is pretty, if it's ugly, or if it's neutral for Chilean society. But also, on the other hand, during the aftermath, there is a moral process in which values of what constitute us as a collective are also negotiated. Particularly values associated with progress, industrialization, patriotism, versus those linked to plurality and diversity have been negotiating these last months in our society. In this process, also moral codes emerge, such as patriotism versus vandalism, progress versus barbarie, order versus chaos, that have been very present in this in the commemoration that we are living today. And just to conclude, what does the aftermath of a counter-monument wave means today that Chile is still experiencing a refundational time? We are still like trying to write the constitution, and we are commemorating, right, the 50-year anniversary of the coup. The counter-monumental wave can be interpreted as an epistemological tool that highlights the hegemonic knowledge, the mnemonic regimes, and also the possibilities to challenge them. It means also a pause in colonial and national silences. The aftermath of the counter-monumental wave has activated debates about memory that were not present in Chile and that have been key in the constituent discussion that has taken place lately. For example, through the reappearance of the conversation about national heroes and debates that we have experienced these last days about the figures of Allende. This illustrates the fragility of counter-hegemonic processes and the eruption of a new conservative wave of hegemonious national narratives and symbols that on the 50 years commemoration of the coup have been more present than ever. And with that, I would like to finish. Thank you very much.